I want to give you guys a possible scenario for the end of Ukraine, how Ukraine will end up in the future. This is not an emphatic statement. I'm not saying that this is going to happen 100%, but I'm saying that this is a possible scenario. So, recently I interviewed a former member of Ukrainian intelligence. His name is Vasily Prozorov. And during my interview, I asked him, I said, well, what do you think will be the end of Ukraine? How do you think Ukraine will end up? And he said that I believe that Eastern Ukraine will become a part of the Russian Federation and that Western Ukraine will be shared between three countries, between Poland, Hungary, and Romania. And all three of these countries have territorial claims to certain parts of Ukraine. So parts of Western Ukraine used to belong to Poland. There is a part of Ukraine. There's a part of Western Ukraine that I think Hungary lays claim to. Same thing with Romania. And he said that the center of Ukraine that'll be Ukraine, right? The center of Ukraine will belong to Kiev. So Ukraine will be reduced to just the center of its country. And you think, well, that just sounds crazy, right? It just sounds completely insane. But think about it. Think about it. Let's say that Eastern Ukraine becomes a part of the Russian Federation in the sense that the Russian Federation, the Russian government says, well, we have new members of our federation. We have Luhansk, we have Donetsk, and maybe they'll add Zaporizhia, maybe they'll add Kherson. So the Russians will say, we have new members of the Russian Federation. And NATO will say, we don't recognize Eastern Ukraine as being a part of the Russian Federation. It's still Ukraine. But effectively, it'll be a part of Russia. Effectively, it will be a part of Russia. You'll go there and you will basically say, yeah, this is Russia. Everyone's speaking Russian. All of the script is in Russian. All the signs and the street signs are in Russian text, Russian script. It's effectively Russia. So NATO will say we don't recognize it, but effectively it'll just be Russia. It's like Transnistria. Transnistria is a part of Moldova, and NATO recognizes it as a part of Moldova, but effectively it's Russia. I mean, you go there, people are speaking Russian, the architecture is Russian, the buildings are Russian. It's Russia. Effectively, it's a part of Russia. So let's say that Eastern Ukraine becomes a part of the Russian Federation. And I think that this is actually very, very likely. I think, Ukraine is losing the war, right? It's very obvious that Ukraine is losing the war. And I think that I don't believe that NATO really believed that Ukraine could win this war. I don't believe that NATO believed that Ukraine had a chance at winning this war. I think that NATO wanted this war as a way to deplete Russia of its manpower, to have a lot of Russians killed. And it was also a way to make money. It was a way for big defense companies to make money. And I think it was a way for NATO to test out its logistics, right? To test out its mechanism by which to send weapons. Can we send weapons effectively to a war zone? I think there were a number of reasons as to why NATO wanted a war between Russia and Ukraine, but I don't believe that NATO believed that Ukraine had a chance at winning. It was very obvious from the beginning that Russia was going to be the winner. Russia is a much larger country. It has a way larger population. It has a way larger military. So it's very obvious that Russia is going to win this war. And what's going to happen? Ukraine is going to have to give up territory. That is inevitable. It's a fact. Ukraine is going to give up territory. Parts of Ukraine are going to be given to the Russian Federation. And effectively, there are parts of eastern Ukraine that are really a part of Russia. I mean, Luhansk. I spoke to a guy who lives in Luhansk, and he told me, he says, we're a part of Russia. He says, if you were to come here, you wouldn't even think there was a war going on. That's what he told me. So there are parts of eastern Ukraine that effectively are a part of Russia already. So Ukraine's going to have to give up territory. And what's going to happen is that the nationalists are going to come along and they're going to say, it was that damn Jew Zelensky. That's what they're going to say. It was that Jew who screwed us over. Zelensky's very corrupt. And one thing that this former member of Ukrainian intelligence told me was that a lot of the weapons that NATO has been sending to Ukraine don't even end up in the battlefield. NATO will send the weapons, right? Millions upon millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars worth in weapons to Ukraine. And a lot of these weapons don't even end up in the hands of Ukrainian soldiers. They end up in the hands of terrorists in Syria, in Nigeria. They end up in the hands of criminals in Italy, in Mexico. Why is that? Because you have a lot of members of the Ukrainian military and of the Ukrainian intelligence service who are extremely corrupt to the point where they don't even give a damn about their own people being able to put up a fight in the battlefield. They'll take crate loads of these weapons, crate loads of ammunition sent by NATO, and they'll say, well, let's sell it. And these weapons and ammunition will end up in Turkey. And from there, they'll end up in Syria, where they will be used by terrorists, and this has already happened. They will end up in Mexico, where they will be in the hands of cartel members, gangsters. They will end up in Italy, where they end up in the hands of organized criminals. And why is this happening? Hell, a lot of NATO weapons are being used by Hamas. And I remember seeing a video from the October 7th massacre where when the Hamas members blew up the security fence between Gaza and Israel, I saw a video where they put it's a type of dynamite. It's a Bangalore, like from Saving Private Ryan. They put the Bangalore right on the fence between Gaza and Israel. And on the Bangalore, you see Polish lettering. You see Polish script. Well, how in the hell does that happen? I mean, these are Hamas terrorists. I don't see any Polish members of Hamas. How do you have a Bangalore? How do you have an explosive with Polish lettering? It's very obvious. This is NATO weaponry being used by Hamas. Well, how did Hamas get their hands on NATO weapons? They got it from the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians were selling, and they are still selling these weapons to terrorists. And even Netanyahu himself made this observation. He said that we fear that a lot of these NATO weapons being sent to Ukraine will be used by terrorists. And he was right. So Zelensky is very corrupt. A lot of weapons that are supposed to be used to fight the Russians are being used in different countries because you have members of Ukrainian intelligence, members of the Ukrainian military who don't give a damn about their own people, and they're selling off the weapons to make money. And this former member of Ukrainian intelligence, Mr. Prozorov, he told me there is no way that Zelensky does not know that this is happening. Zelensky knows that this is happening. You can't have this level of illegal weapon smuggling in the middle of a war and the president doesn't know about it. That just doesn't happen. Politicians don't know about it. That just doesn't happen. Politicians know about these things. It's quite obvious. So Zelensky is very corrupt. And think about it. Think of the propaganda. Ukraine's going to lose the war. That's obvious. Ukraine's going to have to cede territory, give up territory to the Russians. That's obvious. Russia's not going to leave empty-handed. And what I suspect will happen is the Nazis will come out, the Ukrainian nationalists will come out, the ones who praise Bandera and they praise Hitler. They'll come out and they'll say, it was that damn Jew Zelensky, he screwed us over. And it was the corrupt government that was selling weapons to foreigners when those weapons should have been used by Ukrainians to defend themselves, but instead Ukrainians died because of a lack of ammunition. They died because of a lack of weapons and arms from NATO, because our corrupt leaders were selling them to other people, to foreigners. I just can imagine the propaganda that will be used. And you know what this reminds me of? It reminds me of Germany after World War I. So if you look at a map of Germany before the end of World War I, Germany had a lot more territory than Germany after World War I. Why? Well, because as the loser, Germany lost territory. That's what happens when you lose a war. When you lose a war, you lose territory. After World War I, the Allies said, okay, A chunk of Germany is going to go to Poland. A chunk of Germany is going to go to France. A chunk of Germany is going to go to Czechoslovakia. And Germany is going to get smaller. And what did the Nazis say in their propaganda? They said it was the Jews who screwed over Germany, and that's why we lost territory. That's why we lost Lebensraum, living space for the German folk. And I think the nationalists will use this same type of propaganda in Ukraine. They'll say we lost territory because of that damn Jew Zelensky. And think about it, Poland, going back to Poland for decades has been expressing fear about a Russian invasion. The biggest fear that Polish people have is of Russia. That's their biggest fear, more than anything. And think about it. Let's say eastern Ukraine gets put under the control, or at least a major chunk of eastern Ukraine gets put under the control of Russia and is under Russian occupation. I can imagine the Polish people or the Polish government saying things like, oh my gosh, look, Russia has taken control of eastern Ukraine. We have to do something. We have to create a buffer. And I wouldn't be surprised to see one day in the future Polish troops in Western Ukraine. And if that ever happens, it'll be under the pretense or the pretext of making a buffer zone against Russian expansion. But behind the pretext will be the motivation of retaking what used to belong to Poland, because a chunk of Western Ukraine used to belong to Poland. Places like Lvov or East Galicia was a part of Poland at one point in time. So I wouldn't be surprised to see what this former member of Ukrainian intelligence thinks will happen, which is Western Ukraine being shared between other countries. I wouldn't be surprised to see Poland putting troops in Western Ukraine, and I wouldn't be surprised to see one day Ukrainian nationalists saying it was that Jew Zelensky who screwed us over, and that's why we need Nazism or Banderitism. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.